I'm Rachel Morgan, 32, and I never thought my entire life would collapse in a single day. My husband Trevor, my partner of 8 years, had vanished without a trace, leaving me alone with our 3-month-old twins. His mother Elaine had orchestrated everything, from the secret bank accounts to the business trip that was actually his escape plan. I was devastated, broke, and desperate when the local news station interviewed me about single motherhood. Little did I know, Trevor was watching from his hotel room across the country. Before I continue with my story, I'm curious to know where you're watching from today. This journey taught me that support can come from the most unexpected places. If my story of family betrayal and eventual justice resonates with you, please consider subscribing to hear more survivor stories like mine. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the end to see how karma finally caught up with my manipulative mother-in-law. Before everything fell apart, I had what many would consider a dream life. I was a successful marketing executive at a Seattle tech firm with a corner office overlooking Elliott Bay. My career had been on a steady upward trajectory until I willingly pressed pause to focus on starting a family with Trevor. We met at a charity gala 6 years ago, where he was representing his family's real estate development company, and I was there on behalf of my firm. Our connection was immediate and intense. Within 3 months, we were inseparable, and by 6 months, he had proposed with a family heirloom ring that his grandmother had left specifically for the woman who would make Trevor truly happy. We settled in an upscale Seattle suburb, in a craftsman house with a view of Lake Washington. From the outside, we were the perfect couple, attractive, successful, and deeply in love. Our social media feeds were filled with vacation photos from Bali, anniversary dinners at exclusive restaurants, and candid moments that showcased our seemingly unshakable bond. Friends jokingly called us #relationship goals, and for a while, I believed it too. The one cloud on our horizon was our struggle to conceive. For 4 years, we navigated the heartbreaking world of fertility treatments. I endured countless hormone injections, 3 failed IVF cycles, and the monthly disappointment that wore down our spirits. Trevor remained my rock through it all, holding my hand during procedures and reassuring me that we would become parents one way or another. When we finally saw those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, our joy was indescribable. The discovery that we were expecting twins a few weeks later seemed like the universe was making up for lost time. But as my belly grew, so did the presence of my mother-in-law, Elaine, in our lives. I'd always sensed Elaine's reservations about me. She came from old money. Her great-grandfather had been one of Seattle's founding developers, and she carried herself with the polished restraint of someone who believed bloodlines mattered above all else. During our engagement, she had taken me aside and tactfully inquired about my people, a thinly veiled attempt to assess whether I came from the right background. When I told her my father was a high school teacher and my mother a nurse, something flickered behind her eyes, a momentary but unmistakable disappointment. "How refreshingly normal," she had said, patting my hand in a way that made me feel like a curiosity rather than a future daughter-in-law. Still, I dismissed these red flags, attributing her behavior to generational differences and the natural protectiveness of a mother toward her only son. Trevor had warned me that she had been similarly critical of his previous girlfriends, none of whom had lasted long. In hindsight, I should have recognized this pattern for what it was: Elaine systematically removing women she deemed unworthy of the family name. Trevor's family wealth was substantial. The Morgans had developed half of downtown Seattle back in the 1960s and maintained significant real estate holdings throughout the Pacific Northwest. Trevor worked alongside his uncle Bernard in the family business, though I later discovered his position was largely ceremonial, a way for Elaine to keep him dependent on family approval. When the twins were born, a boy and girl we named Ethan and Emma, the initial joy was overwhelming. Trevor cried as he held them for the first time, promising to be the kind of father who would always put them first. Those early weeks were a blur of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that only new parents understand. Yet beneath the chaos, there was profound happiness. But Elaine's interference escalated almost immediately. She began showing up unannounced, criticizing everything from how I swaddled the babies to the organic formula I used when my milk supply struggled to keep up with two hungry infants. In my day, she would say while rearranging the nursery I had spent months perfecting, we knew that babies need firm schedules and boundaries. You're creating bad habits with all this on-demand feeding, Rachel. Trevor, who had been my fierce defender during our dating and early marriage, began to change. The shift was subtle at first. He would gently suggest that maybe his mother had a point about sleep training or pediatricians. Then he started staying late at work, coming home after the twins were asleep, citing stress about new responsibilities at the office. I found receipts for lunches at restaurants near his mother's Bellevue mansion rather than his downtown office. His phone would ding with texts that he would check with his body angled away from me. When I asked questions, he would blame new parent stress and change the subject. Our last normal family dinner happened on a rainy Tuesday, just 3 days before Trevor disappeared. Elaine had invited us to her home, insisting that I needed a break from cooking. Throughout the meal, she peppered the conversation with subtle digs about my parenting. The twins look a bit pale, don't they? Are you sure they're getting enough sunlight, Rachel? When Trevor was a baby, I made sure he had at least an hour outdoors every day, regardless of the weather. I saw something pass between mother and son, a loaded glance that made my stomach tighten. Later that night, Trevor announced he needed to fly to New York for 2 weeks to oversee a new development project. The timing seemed strange given the twins had just had their 3-month checkup, but he insisted it was unavoidable. It's a huge opportunity, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Dad would have wanted me to take the lead on this one. I helped him pack, noticing he seemed to be taking more suits than a 2-week trip would require. When I mentioned it, he laughed it off, saying he wasn't sure what events he might need to attend. He kissed me goodbye the next morning, lingering a moment longer than usual, his eyes scanning my face, as if memorizing it. "Take care of yourself, Rachel," he said, and then he was gone. That was the last time I saw my husband for 6 months. I woke up the next morning to the sound of Emma crying through the baby monitor. The house was quiet aside from her hungry wails, too quiet. Trevor's side of the bed was empty, which wasn't unusual since he had mentioned an early flight. I stumbled to the nursery, fed both babies, and only when they were settled did I check my phone. There was a single text from Trevor, sent at 4:18 a.m. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry." I stared at those 7 words, my mind refusing to process their meaning. I called him immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. I told myself there must be some misunderstanding. Maybe he was stressed about work or having second thoughts about the New York trip. Perhaps he had meant he couldn't handle the business pressure, not our marriage or family. With the twins settled in their swings, I made coffee and tried to shake the uneasiness creeping through me. On a hunch, I checked our joint bank account on my phone. The balance that had been comfortably in the 5 figures yesterday now showed just $212.37. My hands shaking, I tried our savings account. Empty. A cold wave of panic washed over me. I rushed to our closet where Trevor kept his passport and important documents in a fireproof safe. My code didn't work. He had changed it. Somehow, I managed to pry it open using an online tutorial and a screwdriver, only to find it completely empty. No passports, no birth certificates, no property deeds. Nothing. I called Trevor's office with my heart in my throat. "Mr. Morgan?" "He's on leave," his assistant said, sounding confused. "He filed for personal time 3 weeks ago." Indefinite leave. I thought you knew. The room seemed to tilt around me. 3 weeks ago. He had been planning this for at least 3 weeks. My next call was to Elaine. She answered on the first ring as if she had been waiting for my call. "Rachel," she said, her voice cool and composed. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Where is Trevor?" I demanded, struggling to keep my voice steady, with the twins now fussing in the background. "What's going on?" There was a pause, and then Elaine spoke with a satisfaction that made my blood run cold. "Trevor has finally come to his senses. Surely you knew this arrangement wasn't sustainable." "What arrangement?" "We're married." We have children together. Children you trapped him with, she replied smoothly. Let's be honest, Rachel. A man like Trevor doesn't suddenly achieve a pregnancy after years of trying, unless someone gets desperate. He's simply correcting a mistake before it defines his entire life. The accusation was so outlandish that I couldn't even form a response. We had both wanted those babies more than anything. I had the hospital bills from fertility treatments to prove it. I hung up and sank to the floor, my mind racing. The twins began crying in earnest now, as if sensing their world had just shattered. Somehow, I managed to feed and change them again, operating on autopilot while my thoughts spun out of control. That afternoon, with the babies finally napping, I began a frantic search of our home office. Behind Trevor's collection of first edition books, I found a manila envelope containing documents I had never seen before. Bank statements for an account in his name only. Property information for a condo in Los Angeles. A consultation agreement with a high-powered divorce attorney dated 2 months earlier. Most damning of all was a handwritten letter from Elaine outlining her plan, for Trevor to extract himself from the situation with minimal financial exposure. She had detailed how to move assets gradually, how to establish residency in California, where family law might be more favorable to him, and how to build a case that I was an unstable mother. I was still staring at these papers, numb with shock, when my phone rang. It was Malcolm, Trevor's college roommate and best man at our wedding. Rachel, He hesitated. I just heard from Trevor. He asked me to check on you. You know where he is? I could hear the desperation in my voice. Malcolm, tell me what's going on. Another painful pause. He's been unhappy for a while, Ratch. He said the pressure of the twins, the expectations, it was too much.
I'm sorry.
I thought you guys were working through it. Working through it? He cleaned out our accounts and disappeared. He's been planning this for months. Malcolm's uncomfortable silence told me everything. You knew, I whispered. You all knew he was going to abandon his 3-month-old babies. Not exactly, Malcolm backpedaled. He said he needed space to figure things out. I didn't know about the money. That's not cool. After hanging up, I called my sister Amanda, the only person I could trust completely. She arrived 3 hours later with groceries, diapers, and a fierce determination to help. That absolute bastard. She fumed while rocking Ethan. And that witch of a mother. We're going to fight this, Rachel. You're not alone. The next morning, I met with a lawyer Amanda had researched overnight. Patricia Winters was a no-nonsense family law attorney who listened to my story without visible judgment, though her eyes hardened when I showed her the documents I had found. Mrs. Morgan, I won't sugarcoat this. Your husband has taken deliberate steps to disadvantage you financially and possibly legally. The good news is that abandonment and financial misconduct are things courts take seriously, especially with infant children involved. She explained that we needed to file for emergency temporary support and custody immediately. She also recommended freezing any assets we could identify and documenting everything about the twins' care to counter any potential claims about my parenting. One more thing, she added as I was leaving. These documents suggest your mother-in-law may have hired someone to build a case against you. Be extra careful about who you allow into your home and what you share on social media. Document everything. Sure enough, when I returned home, I found a business card tucked into my mailbox for discreet family investigations. A quick internet search confirmed it was a private investigation firm specializing in custody cases. The reality that I was being watched while caring for my babies added a new layer of terror to an already unbearable situation. That night, after the twins were asleep, Amanda helped me search the house for hidden cameras or recording devices. We found nothing, but the paranoia remained. As I lay awake in my marriage bed, alone except for the soft sounds of my babies breathing through the monitor, I realized the full magnitude of the betrayal. Trevor hadn't just left me. He and his mother had been methodically planning to destroy me. The weeks following Trevor's disappearance were a blur of sleepless nights, legal meetings, and the constant, grinding anxiety of financial freefall. Our mortgage payment bounced, The first time I had ever missed a bill in my adult life. The credit cards were declined when I tried to buy diapers. The health insurance for the twins and me had been canceled. My emergency savings, which I had maintained separately since before our marriage, became our lifeline. It wasn't much. Just enough to cover a few months of basic expenses if I was extremely careful. The money that was supposed to start the twins' college funds now paid for their formula and diapers. Amanda stayed with me for 2 weeks, sleeping on the couch and helping with midnight feedings, but she eventually had to return to her job in Portland. Before leaving, she helped me find a small, affordable apartment near a public transportation line. The contrast between our spacious lakefront home and the 2-bedroom walk-up was stark, but I felt a strange relief at leaving behind the house that now felt tainted by Trevor's deception. Patricia, my attorney, filed emergency motions for child support and temporary custody. A week later, we received the response. Trevor had filed for divorce and joint custody in Los Angeles County, claiming California residency. His filing included insinuations about my mental stability and fitness as a mother, all part of the strategy Elaine had outlined in her letter. He's claiming the babies were born in California during a family visit and that you agreed to move there before changing your mind, Patricia explained, outrage evident in her voice. It's completely false, but it creates jurisdictional complications we'll need to fight. Fighting required money I didn't have. Patricia agreed to defer some of her fees, but the court costs and filing fees alone were overwhelming. With no income and dwindling savings, I needed to find work I could do while caring for 2 infants. My former marketing position wasn't an option. It required long hours and travel that were impossible as a single mother with no support system. Instead, I leveraged my professional contacts to start a small social media consulting business that I could operate from home during the twins' nap times and after they went to sleep. My first client was a local bakery owned by a mother who had heard about my situation through a parenting group. She paid me in cash and pastries, which wasn't ideal but helped keep us afloat. Gradually, I built a small roster of local businesses who needed help with their online presence. The income was a fraction of my former salary, but it covered groceries and utilities. The hardest part wasn't the financial struggle, though that was crushing. It was caring for 2 babies while processing the emotional trauma of abandonment. There were days when I would finally get both twins settled for nap, sit down to work, and find myself sobbing uncontrollably instead. The betrayal felt physical, an actual pain in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. I joined an online support group for parents who had been abandoned by partners. The stories shared there were both heartbreaking and fortifying. These strangers understood the unique pain of having the person who was supposed to be your partner in parenting walk away from innocent children. Melissa, a group member who had been through a similar situation 3 years earlier, became my virtual mentor. She had practical advice about documenting everything for court, finding affordable childcare, and managing the overwhelming emotions. Create a binder, she advised during one late-night chat while I was up with a fussy Ethan. Every communication, every receipt, every photo of you caring for the babies. Date everything. This isn't just for court, it's for your kids when they're older and have questions. I followed her advice religiously, creating detailed records of every aspect of our lives. I took daily photos of the twins with timestamps, kept a journal of their milestones, and saved every email and text related to Trevor's abandonment. If he was building a case against me, I was building a stronger one that reflected reality. 4 months after Trevor left, I received an unexpected message from Jasmine Reynolds, a college friend who worked as a producer at the local news station. We hadn't been close in years, but she had heard about my situation through mutual acquaintances. "We're doing a special segment on the challenges facing single parents," her message read. "Your story is powerful, Rachel. Would you consider being interviewed? It might help other women in similar situations." My immediate instinct was to decline. I was barely keeping my head above water, and the thought of exposing my pain on television was terrifying. Plus, I worried about how it might affect any future legal proceedings. When I mentioned the invitation to Patricia, however, she saw it differently. "Public sympathy can be powerful," she noted. "If the segment is done respectfully, it humanizes you and the twins. It makes it harder for Trevor and his mother to paint you as unstable or unfit. I also discussed it with my support group. The consensus was clear. Visibility could be protection. The more people who knew my story, the harder it would be for Trevor and Elaine to manipulate the narrative. Still uncertain, I agreed to meet with Jasmine for coffee. She was sensitive and thoughtful about the approach they would take. "This isn't about creating drama or exposing Trevor," she assured me. "It's about showing the reality of suddenly becoming a single parent to twins and how you're rebuilding your life. We won't ambush you with questions you're not prepared for." After careful consideration and consultation with Patricia, I agreed to the interview with specific conditions: no mention of Trevor by name, no speculation about his whereabouts, and a focus on the challenges and joys of raising the twins rather than the abandonment itself. The day of the interview arrived with a mix of anxiety and determination. Amanda drove up from Portland to watch the twins while I prepared, then helped me dress them in their cutest outfits for the on-camera portion. The station had agreed to film in our apartment to avoid disrupting the baby's routine. As the crew set up lights and cameras in our small living room, I fought back waves of nervousness. What if I broke down on camera? What if this exposure somehow made things worse? What if Trevor saw it? That last thought hadn't seriously occurred to me until that moment. Wherever he was, he might see this broadcast. The realization added another layer of complexity to my already tumultuous emotions. The twins, however, seemed completely unfazed by the commotion. They were now 7 months old and becoming more interactive by the day. Emma was attempting to crawl, pushing herself backward instead of forward, but determined nonetheless. Ethan was more verbal, babbling constantly as if providing commentary on the strange people invading their home. As the camera crew finished setting up, Jasmine gave me a reassuring smile. "You're doing great, Rachel. Just tell your truth. That's all anyone can ask." I took a deep breath and nodded, ready to share my story not just for myself, but for my children and others facing similar battles. What I didn't know then was that this interview would become the turning point in our entire saga, the moment that would ultimately bring Trevor back and expose Elaine's manipulation for the world to see. The red light on the camera blinked on, and Jasmine's professional demeanor shifted subtly as she introduced the segment. Today we're speaking with Rachel Morgan, a local mother who found herself suddenly raising 7-month-old twins alone after her husband's unexpected departure. Rachel, thank you for sharing your story with us. My hands were trembling in my lap, but I managed to keep my voice steady. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about single parenting. It's a reality many people face, often without warning. Jasmine nodded encouragingly. Can you tell us about the moment your life changed? I had rehearsed this answer carefully with Patricia, focusing on facts rather than accusations. 7 months ago, I woke up to find myself solely responsible for our 3-month-old twins. Our joint accounts had been emptied, and I had no access to our financial resources. I went from being part of a team to being completely on my own with 2 infants depending on me for everything. That must have been terrifying, Jasmine said, genuine compassion in her voice. It was, I admitted, feeling the familiar tightness in my throat. The financial abandonment was devastating, but the emotional betrayal was worse. These babies deserved both parents, and suddenly half of their support system was gone. The interview continued with questions about how I had managed practically, finding affordable housing, creating an income stream, and caring for the twins alone. I spoke about the community resources that had helped us survive and the online support group that had become my emotional lifeline. Throughout the interview, the twins played on a blanket nearby, occasionally making adorable noises that the crew couldn't resist filming. About halfway through, during a question about my hopes for the future, both babies looked up at the camera simultaneously and smiled their gummy, heart-melting smiles as if on cue. "They're incredibly resilient," I said, watching them with a mixture of pride and heartache. "They don't know anything is missing from their lives yet. My greatest fear is the moment when they're old enough to ask why their father isn't here, what they did wrong to make him leave." That was when the tears I had been fighting finally spilled over. They didn't do anything wrong. They're perfect. How could anyone walk away from these beautiful children? Jasmine handed me a tissue, allowing me a moment to compose myself. The camera lingered on the twins, who were now holding hands in that unconscious way that made everyone who saw them melt. What would you say to other parents facing similar circumstances? Jasmine asked once I had recovered. I looked directly into the camera, suddenly thinking about all the others out there struggling alone. Document everything. Find support, whether it's family, friends, or online communities. Know your legal rights. And remember that your children are watching how you handle this crisis. They're learning resilience from you. I took a deep breath before continuing. Some days, all you can do is keep everyone fed and relatively clean. That's enough. Some days, just surviving is a victory. As the interview was wrapping up, Emma began crawling toward me, forward this time, her first successful attempt, while Ethan babbled excitedly, as if cheering her on. The crew captured this beautiful moment, Jasmine commenting on the perfect timing. They know their mama needed some encouragement, I said, lifting Emma into my arms when she reached me. Ethan, not to be left out, used the coffee table to pull himself up and took unsteady steps in my direction while holding on. The segment ended with this unscripted moment of family connection, a mother and her twins supporting each other through a difficult journey. After the crew packed up and left, promising the segment would air the following week, I felt a strange mixture of vulnerability and empowerment. I had shared our pain publicly, something I never imagined doing, but there was relief in speaking my truth. What none of us anticipated was how powerfully the segment would resonate with viewers. Jasmine called the day after filming, excitement evident in her voice. The raw footage is incredible, Rachel. Our editor was in tears. The station manager wants to feature it prominently and share it with our affiliate stations. The segment aired the following Tuesday during the evening news. I watched from our apartment, the twins already asleep in their cribs, a glass of wine in my hand for courage. Seeing myself on screen was surreal. I looked simultaneously stronger and more vulnerable than I felt. The editing was masterful, capturing both the hardship and the hope in our story. The moment when the twins smiled at the camera became the thumbnail image for the online version, their innocent faces contrasting powerfully with the story of abandonment. By morning, the segment had gone viral. The station's social media accounts were flooded with comments, many from other single parents sharing their own stories. The hashtag #StandWithRachel was trending locally, with people expressing outrage at our situation and offering support. My phone began pinging with notifications, messages from old friends, former colleagues, even high school classmates who had seen the broadcast. Many included offers of help, babysitting, job connections, donated baby supplies. A local law firm specializing in family cases reached out offering pro bono assistance. Most surprisingly, a GoFundMe created by a viewer raised over $20,000 in less than 24 hours. The generosity was overwhelming, and I found myself weeping with gratitude at the kitchen table while the twins napped. I didn't know it then, but 600 miles away in a Los Angeles hotel room, Trevor had also seen the segment. It had been shared by a Seattle friend on his private social media with a pointed comment about abandoning responsibilities. According to what he later told me, he had been living in a state of cognitive dissonance for months, believing the narrative his mother had crafted while suppressing his own doubts. Seeing his children on screen, Emma's determined crawl, Ethan's babbling, their innocent faces, something broke through the fog of his mother's manipulation. He saw the reality of what he had done, not the sanitized version Elaine had been feeding him. The first indication I had of this breakthrough was a series of text messages that began arriving around midnight. Rachel, I saw the interview. I need to talk to you. Please call me. I've made a terrible mistake. The twins look so big now. I've missed so much. I know you have every reason to hate me, but please let me explain. I didn't respond to any of these messages. Instead, I forwarded them to Patricia with shaking hands. Her advice was immediate and firm. No direct communication. Everything needed to go through our attorneys now. The next morning, The news station received an anonymous tip about Trevor's whereabouts, including the information that he had been staying in Los Angeles while being financially supported by his mother. Jasmine called to give me a heads up that they were considering a follow-up story. "We won't do anything without your permission," she assured me. But this adds a significant dimension to the story, especially with the family wealth aspect. I consulted with Patricia, who saw strategic value in allowing limited follow-up coverage. Public accountability can be powerful, she noted. It makes it harder for them to continue operating in shadows. The follow-up segment aired 3 days later, focusing factually on the contrast between my financial struggle with the twins and the considerable family wealth that could have supported them. They didn't name Trevor directly, respecting my conditions, but referred to the estranged husband from a prominent Seattle real estate family and the controlling matriarch who orchestrated the separation. The public response was immediate and fierce. The Morgan family's business received calls from angry clients. Their charitable foundation faced questions from partner organizations. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict, and it was unequivocally in our favor. This was the moment where the power dynamic began to shift, where Trevor and Elaine's carefully constructed narrative began to crumble under the weight of reality and public scrutiny. The next chapter would begin with a knock on my apartment door just 2 days later, when Trevor would finally face the consequences of his actions in person. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after someone shattered your trust, you know the mixed emotions I was feeling at this point. I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether you'd have answered those texts or kept the boundary firm like I did. The hardest battles often happen when we're alone with our thoughts, wondering if we're making the right choices. Let me know in the comments, and if you want to see how this confrontation with Trevor unfolds, make sure you're subscribed for the next part of my story. The knock came on a Thursday evening as I was preparing dinner for the twins. Through the peephole, I saw Trevor standing in the hallway of my apartment building, looking nothing like the confident man who had left 6 months earlier. His normally impeccable appearance was disheveled, wrinkled shirt, unshaven face, dark circles under his eyes. For a moment, I considered not answering, but a strange calm had settled over me. I needed to face this. I opened the door, but blocked the entrance. "You should have called first." "I did. You didn't answer." His voice cracked slightly. "Rachel, please. 5 minutes. Our lawyers should be handling this." "I know, but I need to see them." His eyes moved past me, searching for the twins. "Please." Against my better judgment, and what would certainly have been Patricia's advice, I stepped aside. 5 minutes. They're eating dinner. Trevor walked into the apartment, his eyes widening as he took in our new reality. The cramped space so different from our former home, the second-hand furniture, the obvious downgrade in our living situation. When he saw the twins in their high chairs, he stopped abruptly. "They're so big," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Emma and Ethan stared at this stranger with identical expressions of curiosity. They showed no recognition whatsoever of their father. Why would they? He was nothing more than a photograph I had kept on their dresser, a ghost I couldn't bring myself to erase completely. "Can I?" Trevor gestured toward them. "You can say hello. Don't expect them to know who you are." He approached cautiously and knelt beside their high chairs.
Ethan.
He faltered, looking up at me uncertainly. "Your father," I finished flatly. Though that's just biology at this point. Trevor winced, but didn't argue. He attempted to touch Emma's hand, but she pulled away, suddenly shy with this unfamiliar person. Ethan, always the more outgoing twin, offered Trevor a piece of his mashed banana, which he pretended to eat with exaggerated appreciation. The awkwardness of the moment was palpable. After a few minutes of one-sided interaction, I said, "They need to finish eating. Say what you came to say." Trevor stood and moved to the living area, his shoulders slumped. "I know nothing I say will make this right. Correct. But I need you to know that my mother manipulated me in ways I'm only beginning to understand." He ran a hand through his unkempt hair. "She convinced me you were planning to take the twins and leave, that you had been consulting with divorce attorneys behind my back." I stared at him incredulously. And you believed that? Without asking me? She had evidence, emails, recordings. All fake, I know now. His voice was desperate. She told me you were showing signs of postpartum psychosis, that you weren't bonding with the twins properly, that you resented them for what they did to your career. That's absurd, I said, my anger rising. I wanted those babies more than anything. We both did. Or so I thought. Trevor reached into his jacket and pulled out a thumb drive. Everything's here. The faked evidence, the manipulated conversations, the trust documents she used to control me. I've been seeing a therapist in LA who helped me see what was happening. I made no move to take the drive. Why should I believe anything you say now? You shouldn't, he admitted. I wouldn't. But the truth is here, and I'm prepared to admit everything in court, to give sworn testimony about what my mother did, what I allowed her to do. He explained that Elaine had been planning this since before the twins were born. She had never accepted me as worthy of the Morgan name and saw the pregnancy as her final chance to separate us. The evidence began with subtle manipulations, comments taken out of context, normal new mother struggles framed as dangerous instability. She hired someone, Trevor continued, shame evident in his voice. An actress who posed as a prospective nanny when you were interviewing for help. She recorded everything, then edited it to make it sound like you were saying disturbing things about the babies. I remembered the interviews, how desperate I had been for help with the twins, how none of the candidates had seemed quite right. I wondered why no one worked out. My mother made sure of it. She wanted you isolated, overwhelmed. It made her narrative more believable. The most damning revelation was about the financial control. Elaine had created a trust that would provide Trevor with his inheritance only if he left me before the twins turned 1. The document stipulated that if he remained married to me, his entire inheritance would go to his cousins instead. She told me it was temporary, just until we could establish a custody arrangement that would protect the twins from your instability, Trevor explained. I was supposed to file for full custody once I established California residency, using the evidence she had manufactured. And you went along with this? I couldn't keep the disgust from my voice. You abandoned your children based on doctored evidence and the threat of losing money? Trevor's face crumpled. There's no excuse. I've been weak and cowardly my entire life where my mother is concerned. The therapist says it's enmeshment, that she trained me from childhood to prioritize her approval above everything else. He pulled out his phone and played a recording, Elaine's voice, crystal clear, laying out the final stages of her plan. Once the California courts award you primary custody, we'll bring the children home where they belong. Rachel can have supervised visitation if she agrees to mental health treatment. If not, we have enough evidence to limit her access entirely. I felt physically ill listening to this cold calculation about my children's future. When did you record this? 2 weeks ago. After I saw the news segment. Trevor looked directly at me for the first time. Seeing you and the twins, it broke through something. I started questioning everything she had told me. When I confronted her, she was so confident, so dismissive of my concerns that I knew I needed proof. I recorded our next conversation, without her knowledge. While this conversation unfolded, the twins finished their dinner. I cleaned their hands and faces and moved them to their play area where they could safely explore while still in my sight. Trevor watched this routine with visible longing. You're an amazing mother, he said quietly. I always knew that. I think that's why my mother had to work so hard to convince me otherwise. She knew the truth was obvious to anyone watching you with them. Stop, I said, raising a hand. Don't compliment me for doing what any decent parent does. You don't get to ease your guilt that way. Trevor nodded, accepting the rebuke. You're right. I want to make this right, Rachel. I'll do whatever it takes. Full financial transparency, signing the house over to you, child support backdated to when I left. Anything. It's not about money, I said, though the financial relief would be substantial. It's about trust. You broke something fundamental. These babies relied on both of us, and you walked away based on lies you chose to believe. I know. The pain in his voice seemed genuine. I'll never forgive myself for that. But please, don't keep me from trying to be their father now. I'll accept any conditions, any restrictions. I just can't miss any more of their lives. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Do not engage directly with Trevor. If he's there, tell him to leave immediately and contact his attorney. I showed Trevor the message. My lawyer is right. This conversation shouldn't be happening. Whatever comes next has to go through proper channels. He looked defeated but didn't argue. I understand. For what it's worth, I've fired my mother's attorney. I have new representation who knows the whole truth and has advised me to be completely transparent. As Trevor prepared to leave, he paused by the twins' play area, watching them for a moment with naked longing. They have my mother's eyes, he said softly. I used to think that was a good thing. Trevor, I said as he reached the door, why did you really come here tonight? You could have sent all this evidence through attorneys. He turned back, his expression raw with emotion. I saw a comment on the news segment online. Someone wrote that the twins would grow up wondering what was wrong with them, what made them so easy to leave behind. His voice broke. I couldn't bear the thought of them ever believing that for a second. Nothing was wrong with them. Nothing was wrong with you. The fault was entirely mine. After he left, I sat on the floor beside my playing babies and tried to process everything I had learned. Part of me wanted to dismiss it all as more manipulation, but the recording of Elaine had been undeniably real. The depth of her plotting was chilling. She had been willing to destroy her grandchildren's family to maintain control over her son. I called Patricia and relayed the conversation, including the evidence Trevor had provided. She was professionally disapproving about the direct contact, but intensely interested in the thumb drive and recording. This could change everything, she said after I described the contents. If he's willing to testify against his mother, to admit the financial coercion and her manipulation of evidence, we have a much stronger position. But Rachel, she added cautiously, be careful. People who feel cornered can become dangerous. If Elaine realizes Trevor has turned on her, there's no telling how she might react. That warning would prove prophetic in the days to come, as Elaine realized her carefully constructed plan was unraveling and decided on one final, desperate attempt to maintain control, a confrontation that would expose the full extent of her manipulation to the entire Morgan family. After consulting extensively with Patricia, Trevor and I developed a strategy to confront Elaine with the evidence of her manipulation. We needed witnesses, neutral parties who could testify to what transpired and who couldn't be easily dismissed as biased. Trevor suggested his uncle Bernard, his father's brother who had always maintained a careful distance from Elaine's controlling nature. Bernard has been skeptical of my mother's influence for years, Trevor explained during one of our now regular attorney-supervised meetings. He stayed in the family business because my father asked him to watch over my interests, but he and my mother have never been close. The plan was deceptively simple. Trevor would invite Elaine to Sunday dinner at his newly rented Seattle apartment, mentioning that he was considering reconciliation with me for the twins' sake. Bernard would arrive first, ostensibly to discuss business matters. I would arrive last with the twins, creating a situation where Elaine couldn't easily leave without revealing her true intentions. Patricia arranged for a legal assistant to be present, posing as a nanny helping with the twins, who could serve as an additional witness. Everything would be documented and recorded in accordance with Washington state's one-party consent laws. The Sunday of the confrontation arrived with a tension that felt like electricity in the air. The twins, now 8 months old, were dressed in outfits Elaine had given them before Trevor's disappearance, a small but deliberate detail that Trevor suggested would put his mother at ease initially. Trevor texted when Elaine arrived at his apartment. She's here. Uncle Bernard, too. All set. I waited 30 minutes as planned, then made my way to the address with the twins and Patricia's assistant, Sarah. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This woman had tried to destroy my family, to separate me from my children, all because she deemed me unworthy of her precious family name. When Trevor opened the door, the look that passed between us held months of complicated emotions: anger, regret, determination, and something else I wasn't ready to name. He squeezed my hand briefly before leading us into the dining room where Elaine and Bernard were seated. The moment Elaine saw me with the twins, her carefully composed society matron facade slipped. Her eyes widened in shock before narrowing with cold fury. "What is the meaning of this, Trevor?" she demanded, her voice tightly controlled. Trevor remained calm. "Mother, I've asked Rachel to join us because we have important family matters to discuss. Uncle Bernard is here as a family witness." Bernard, a distinguished man in his 60s with kind eyes that reminded me of Trevor's father, stood and greeted me warmly. "Rachel, it's good to see you. And these must be Emma and Ethan. They've grown so much since the christening." Elaine remained seated, her posture rigid. "If I had known this was some sort of ambush, I wouldn't have come." "Not an ambush, Mother. A reckoning." Trevor's voice was steadier than I had ever heard it. He placed a small recording device on the table. "We need to discuss what you've done and how we move forward from here." What followed was the most extraordinary 2 hours of my life. Trevor methodically presented the evidence of Elaine's manipulation, the doctor recordings, the fake emails, the trust document designed to financially coerce him, and finally, the recording of Elaine herself outlining the plan to gain custody of the twins. As each piece of evidence was presented, Elaine's denials evolved from outright rejection. "This is all fabricated," to attempted justification. "I was only protecting the family interests," to desperate deflection. "You've always been weak, Trevor, easily influenced by manipulative women." Bernard's expression grew increasingly grave as the evidence mounted. When the recording of Elaine's custody plans played, he closed his eyes briefly, as if in pain. "Elaine," he said when the recording finished, "do you have any idea of the legal and ethical boundaries you've crossed? Falsifying evidence, financial coercion, attempted parental alienation, these are serious matters." "Oh, please," Elaine scoffed, though her voice held a new tremor. "Everything I did was to protect this family, to protect these children from an unsuitable mother." Unsuitable. I couldn't remain silent any longer. "I have been the only parent these children have had for the past 6 months. I kept them healthy, secure, and loved while working to support them after you orchestrated their abandonment by their father. You trapped my son with that pregnancy," Elaine hissed, her composure cracking further. "A marketing executive with no family background, no connections. You saw the Morgan fortune and planned this from the beginning." "Mother, stop," Trevor interjected. "Rachel and I went through years of fertility treatments together. We both wanted these children desperately. You know that." "What I know," Elaine said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "is that your father would be ashamed of your weakness." Richard understood family loyalty. Bernard's chair scraped back abruptly. "Don't you dare invoke Richard's name in this, Elaine. My brother would be horrified by what you've done." "What would you know about it?" Elaine snapped. "You were always jealous of what Richard and I built." "What you built?" Bernard's laugh was without humor. "Richard built the Morgan legacy. You've been systematically dismantling it since his death, alienating business partners, driving away Trevor's girlfriends if they showed any independence, and now this, manipulating your own son into abandoning his children." The conversation took an unexpected turn when Bernard revealed that this wasn't the first time Elaine had employed such tactics. Decades earlier, she had orchestrated a similar campaign against Trevor's father when he had briefly considered divorcing her, including manufactured evidence of financial impropriety that would have destroyed his reputation in the business community. "Richard confided in me before his death," Bernard said, his gaze fixed on Elaine. "He knew what you had done, but stayed to protect Trevor from your manipulations. He made me promise to watch over Trevor, a promise I've failed to keep adequately." Elaine's face had gone deathly pale. "You're lying. Richard adored me until the day he died." "Did he?" Bernard removed an envelope from his jacket pocket. "He left this with his personal attorney, to be shared if circumstances warranted. I believe they now do." The letter Bernard read aloud was heartbreaking. Richard Morgan's account of his gradual realization that he had married a woman who viewed love as ownership, who would destroy what she couldn't control. He had stayed in the marriage to protect his son, hoping that his influence would balance Elaine's manipulation. As Bernard read, Trevor's expression transformed from shock to grief to a strange sort of relief, as if puzzle pieces that had never quite fit were finally falling into place. The complex relationship between his parents, his father's occasional inexplicable sadness, the tension that had always lurked beneath their family's perfect surface, all of it suddenly made sense. "Dad knew," Trevor whispered. "All those times he encouraged me to make my own decisions, to trust my instincts about people. He was trying to help me break free of her influence." Elaine's composure had completely shattered now. "This is absurd. You're all conspiring against me. After everything I've done for this family." The confrontation might have continued in this vein indefinitely if not for the unexpected arrival of Malcolm Matthews, Trevor's grandfather and the patriarch of the Morgan family. At 92, he rarely left his estate on Bainbridge Island, but Bernard had apparently contacted him after seeing the evidence. Malcolm entered with the aid of a walker, but commanded the room immediately with his presence. Elaine's face registered genuine fear for the first time. "Malcolm, this isn't what it looks like," she began, but the elderly man cut her off with a raised hand. "I've heard the recordings, Elaine. All of them." His voice was thin with age, but steely with resolve. "You have disgraced this family. Morgans do not abandon their children. Ever." He turned to me, his eyes, so like Trevor's, appraising but not unkind. "You must be Rachel. I apologize for not meeting you before now. My health has limited my social engagements, but that's no excuse for allowing this situation to develop." To Trevor, he said simply, "You have disappointed me, grandson. A man stands by his family, regardless of pressure. But you have a chance to correct your course now." Malcolm then revealed the final piece of the puzzle, the actual terms of the family trust, which were nothing like what Elaine had presented to Trevor. There was no clause requiring him to leave me or lose his inheritance. In fact, Richard had specifically structured the trust to prevent exactly this type of manipulation. "Your father anticipated his mother's nature," Malcolm explained to Trevor. "The trust passes to you regardless of your marital status, and specifically includes provisions for your children that cannot be altered or withheld." Elaine's gasp was audible. She had been counting on her control of the family finances to maintain her power over Trevor. Furthermore, Malcolm continued, "In light of these events, the family board will be meeting tomorrow to discuss Elaine's continued role in Morgan Enterprises. I anticipate significant changes." Elaine's face contorted with rage. "You can't do that. I built that company alongside Richard." "The company was built by 3 generations of Morgans," Malcolm corrected coldly. "You were merely a temporary caretaker, one who has betrayed her responsibilities egregiously." Elaine turned to Trevor, her expression suddenly pleading. "You can't let them do this. I'm your mother. Everything I did was for you, to protect you from her influence." She gestured dismissively toward me. Trevor stood straighter than I had ever seen him. "No, Mother. Everything you did was to control me. That ends today." "If you do this," Elaine threatened, desperation edging her voice, "if you choose her over your own mother, you will regret it for the rest of your life." "I'll make sure of it." "That's exactly the problem," Trevor replied quietly. "You see love as a zero-sum game. If I love Rachel and my children, somehow that diminishes my love for you. That's not how healthy love works." The confrontation ended with Elaine storming out, threats of lawsuits and disinheritance trailing behind her. But her power had been irrevocably broken. With Malcolm, Bernard, and now Trevor aligned against her, her ability to manipulate the family wealth and status had evaporated. As Malcolm prepared to leave, he paused beside the twins' portable playpen where they had miraculously remained content throughout the dramatic proceedings. "They have the Morgan eyes," he observed. "Richard's eyes." He looked up at me with unexpected warmth. "Bring them to the island sometime. They should know their heritage, the good parts of it." After Malcolm and Bernard departed, Trevor and I were left alone with the twins and Sarah, who tactfully withdrew to give us privacy. "I know this doesn't fix anything between us," Trevor said, his voice thick with emotion. "But it's a start. Holding my mother accountable was the first step." Looking at him, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time as separate from his mother's influence, I felt the tight knot of anger in my chest begin to loosen slightly. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of a path toward understanding. "It's a start," I agreed cautiously. "For the twins' sake, I hope we can build something new from here. Something healthier." As I gathered the twins to leave, Trevor gently touched Emma's cheek. This time, she didn't pull away. "Thank you for fighting for them," he said. "Even when I didn't. They're worth fighting for," I replied simply. "They always were." The confrontation with Elaine marked the end of her control over our lives, but it was just the beginning of the long, complicated process of rebuilding trust and creating a new kind of family from the ashes of betrayal. The coming months would test all of us in unexpected ways, but for the first time since Trevor's disappearance, I felt a cautious hope for our future. 6 months after the confrontation with Elaine, our lives had transformed in ways I could never have imagined during those dark days of abandonment. Trevor and I were engaged in intensive couples therapy with Dr. Melissa Chin, a specialist in family trauma and reconciliation. Our sessions were often painful, excavating layers of hurt, betrayal, and the complex dynamics that had made Trevor vulnerable to his mother's manipulation. "Trust is rebuilt in small moments," Dr. Chin often reminded us. "Not grand gestures, but daily choices that demonstrate reliability and transparency." Trevor took these words to heart with an earnestness that gradually chipped away at my protective walls. He never missed a therapy session, even when urgent business matters arose. He maintained complete financial transparency, insisting that I have full access to all accounts. Most importantly, he showed up consistently for the twins, learning their routines, preferences, and developing personalities with a dedication that spoke louder than any apology. Emma and Ethan celebrated their first birthday in our new home, a craftsman house in a family-friendly neighborhood that we had purchased together, with legal protections that ensured my ownership regardless of our marital status. The birthday party was small but joyful, with Amanda, Bernard, Malcolm, and a few close friends gathering to watch the twins demolish their first cake with characteristic enthusiasm. Ethan, now walking confidently, had inherited Trevor's analytical nature, carefully examining each gift before deciding how to play with it. Emma, with her infectious laugh and fearless climbing, reminded me of myself at my most determined. Watching them develop their distinct personalities was the greatest joy of my life. Trevor's journey toward healing his relationship with his mother was more complicated. After the family board removed Elaine from her position at Morgan Enterprises, she had retreated to her sister's home in Boston, her social standing in Seattle irreparably damaged by the public nature of the scandal. At Malcolm's insistence, Elaine began therapy as a condition for maintaining any relationship with her grandchildren. Her progress was slow and inconsistent, marked by periods of genuine reflection followed by relapses into manipulation. Trevor maintained firm boundaries, allowing only video calls with the twins that he supervised closely. "She may never truly change," he admitted during one of our late-night conversations after the twins were asleep. "But I need to know I did everything possible to give her that chance, for my own peace of mind." My own healing took unexpected forms. The support group that had been my lifeline during the worst days of abandonment had evolved into something more, a formal nonprofit organization called Bridge Back, dedicated to helping parents in crisis navigate the legal, financial, and emotional challenges of family abandonment. What had begun as 6 desperate mothers in an online chat room was now a registered organization with volunteer lawyers, financial advisors, and counselors. I served as the organization's communications director, leveraging my marketing background to raise awareness and funds. My social media consulting business had expanded as well, with several corporate clients now on retainer, attracted by the publicity from the news segments and my growing reputation for authentic storytelling. Jasmine and the news station did a follow-up piece on our family 8 months after the original interview, focusing on the process of reconciliation and healing. This time, Trevor participated, publicly acknowledging his mistakes and the manipulation that had contributed to them, while emphasizing his commitment to making amends. "I failed as a husband and father," he said candidly to the camera. "No explanation excuses that failure. All I can do now is demonstrate, through consistent actions, that I'm committed to being the father these children deserve and rebuilding trust with their mother, who never wavered in her devotion to them." The segment included footage of Trevor reading to the twins, their little bodies nestled trustingly against him, a poignant contrast to the earlier interview, where they had been strangers to their father. The public response was mixed, but largely supportive of our efforts to heal our family for the children's sake. Trevor's extended family, particularly Bernard and Malcolm, became unexpected sources of support. Malcolm, despite his advanced age, made monthly trips to see the twins, regaling us with stories of the Morgan family history, the parts worth preserving and passing down. "Your grandmother Sophia was a suffragette, you know," he told me during one visit, his eyes twinkling. "Chained herself to the White House fence in 1917. Elaine conveniently omitted that from the family lore. A Morgan woman with a mind of her own didn't fit her narrative. Bernard took Trevor under his wing at the company, mentoring him in a way Elaine had never allowed. Under their joint leadership, Morgan Enterprises began focusing on affordable housing developments alongside their luxury projects, Trevor's initiative, inspired by our experience. Our legal situation resolved more smoothly than anticipated. Trevor's full disclosure of Elaine's manipulation, combined with his commitment to making financial amends, led to a fair settlement that included substantial back-child support and a trust for the twins' future education. More importantly, we established a comprehensive co-parenting plan that prioritized stability and consistency for Emma and Ethan. Patricia, whose legal guidance had been invaluable throughout the ordeal, became a personal friend and fierce advocate for Bridgeback, providing pro bono consultations for parents in similar situations. "What happened to your family represents a particularly extreme case," she told me over coffee one afternoon, "but the underlying issues, financial control, manipulation, using children as pawns, these are depressingly common. Your willingness to share your story publicly has made a difference for countless others." Despite all this progress, reconciliation was neither simple nor linear. There were difficult days when the weight of past betrayal felt overwhelming, when a missed call or unexplained absence from Trevor would trigger all my old fears. There were arguments and setbacks, moments when the future of our relationship seemed uncertain. Through it all, we maintained our commitment to the twins' well-being above all else. Whether we ultimately rebuilt our marriage or established a different kind of family structure, Emma and Ethan would grow up knowing they were loved unconditionally by both parents. On the twins' first birthday, after all the guests had gone home and the children were asleep, Trevor handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked, wary of surprises after everything we'd been through. "Something I've been working on in therapy," he explained. "Dr. Chen suggested writing letters to important people in my life, expressing things I might struggle to say in person." Inside was a letter, pages of Trevor's distinctive handwriting detailing his remorse, his gratitude for my resilience, and his commitment to earning back trust day by day. The final paragraph read, "I don't know if we can ever fully repair what was broken, but I want you to know that watching you fight for our children, even against me when necessary, has been the greatest lesson of my life. You showed me what real family loyalty looks like. Not blind obedience or control, but fierce protection and unwavering love. Whether we find our way back to each other romantically or not, I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of co-parenting with someone of your courage and integrity." 2 weeks after the birthday party, we held a small ceremony in our backyard. Not a vow renewal exactly, since our original vows had been broken, but a new commitment ceremony that acknowledged our complicated past and hopeful future. The twins toddled down the makeshift aisle ahead of me, Emma tossing flower petals with gleeful abandon while Ethan solemnly carried a small box containing simple silver bands. The officiant, a family therapist who had worked with several Bridgeback families, spoke about the meaning of chosen family and the courage required to rebuild after betrayal. Trevor and I exchanged new promises, not the traditional vows of our first wedding, but hard-earned commitments to honesty, respect, and putting our children's well-being first. "I choose to see you clearly," Trevor promised, his voice steady as he placed the silver band on my finger. "Not through anyone else's perspective or influence, but as you truly are. And I choose to be seen by you, without pretense or defense." My own promise acknowledged the reality of our journey. I cannot promise that trust will come easily or that the past will be forgotten. But I can promise to remain open to the possibility of healing, to acknowledge growth when it happens, and to always prioritize the family we've created together. As we approach the twins' second birthday, our future remains a work in progress. Elaine continues her therapy, showing small but meaningful signs of change. Trevor has emerged from her shadow, developing a stronger sense of self and purpose. I have reclaimed my confidence and established financial independence that ensures I will never again be vulnerable to abandonment. Most importantly, Emma and Ethan are thriving, secure in the knowledge that they are loved unconditionally by both parents. They may never remember the tumultuous beginning of their lives, the separation and reconciliation that shaped their early years. What they will know, through our actions and the family culture we're intentionally creating, is that love isn't about possession or control, but about choice, commitment, and the daily decision to put each other first. The letter I wrote for the twins on their first birthday sits in a safe deposit box, to be opened when they're old enough to understand. It doesn't shy away from the difficult truth of their father's temporary abandonment or their grandmother's manipulation. But it also tells the story of redemption, of a family fractured and then rebuilt with greater awareness and intention. "Your father made a terrible mistake," I wrote, "but he found the courage to acknowledge it, make amends, and become the parent you deserve." Sometimes the people who love us fail us profoundly. The question isn't whether failure will happen, it's what we do afterward that defines us. Your father chose to come back, to do the hard work of rebuilding trust, to face consequences rather than running from them. That choice, more than the mistake that preceded it, is the legacy I hope you'll inherit. Family isn't just about blood or legal ties. It's about showing up, day after day, in both crisis and celebration. It's about holding each other accountable while leaving room for growth and forgiveness. It's about creating a home where truth can be spoken without fear and mistakes can be acknowledged without shame. Our story isn't a perfect resolution tied with a neat bow. There are still difficult days, trust rebuilt in inches rather than miles, old wounds that sometimes reopen without warning. But there is also joy, laughter, and the profound satisfaction of watching our children grow surrounded by love that has been tested and strengthened by adversity. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that family is not a static entity but a daily choice to love, to forgive, to grow, to stay. Trevor and I make that choice each morning, eyes open to the complexity of our shared history and the possibility of our future. And on the hardest days, when doubt creeps in or old hurts resurface, I look at Emma and Ethan, these remarkable little humans who embody the best of both of us, and I know with absolute certainty that every struggle was worth it, every battle necessary, to create the family they deserve. I often think about that moment when Trevor saw us on television. How a single image of what he had lost broke through months of manipulation and denial. It reminds me that sometimes the truth is most powerful when it's simply witnessed, not argued or debated, but seen in its raw, undeniable reality. Thank you for witnessing our story. If it resonated with you in any way, I'd be grateful if you'd share it with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after the deepest betrayal. Has anyone in your family ever had to rebuild trust after it was broken? What helped you move forward? Your comments mean so much to me, and subscribing to this channel helps other family stories like mine reach those who need them most. Whatever family challenges you're facing, remember that healing isn't a destination but a journey, one taken one step, one day, one choice at a time.